The airplane performed magnificently. By all indications that we can get, the bombs went exactly where they wanted, and we did our job.
We and our NATO allies have taken this action only after extensive and repeated efforts to obtain a peaceful solution.
I think that there is the will, I know there is the will to continue, but everybody wants this to be settled.
For myself, I want a diplomatic solution.
We are a peaceful people who take no joy in war.
You're watching the primetime news of Radio Television Serbia. Respected viewers, the officials of the NATO Criminal Alliance admitted today in Brussels that their criminal airplanes hit yesterday a column of Albanian refugees returning to their homes. At the press conference in the headquarters of NATO, the spokesperson of the Criminal Alliance admitted their responsibility for this unprecedented crime against humanity, the bombing of the convoy of Albanian refugees from Kosovo. In a well-known manner of justifying mistakes by the scope of the operations, it was announced that the laser-guided missiles were mistakenly dropped on a column of refugees from the 5,000 meters in the sky, beside by mistake of the pilot of the F-16 plane. The pilot believed that was a military convoy. This was announced to the journalists in Brussels. In order to prove that it's human to err, NATO criminals showed to the journalists the statements of the pilot, who, in quite confused a story about the civilian convoy, didn't forget to sell one more story from the NATO arsenal of lies, that the Serbian police is torching Albanian villages so that the refugees have no place to return. So therefore he was trying to punish those arsonists. Many questions of the journalists, just as on many other press conferences, were left without answer. Among other questions, the main one: how far will NATO go to justify its crime? After 24 hours of attempts by the highest officials of NATO to relativize the crime or to accuse the Yugoslav government of this massacre, pressed by facts, these criminals that have not been seen so far in the world admitted finally their crime. Last night, Tony Blair, that petty American servant and shame to England, tried to accuse this crime, to ascribe this crime to others. First, he said that the massacre was not committed by English pilots. Then he said that the bombing of civilians was done by Yugoslav government. And finally, mixing himself up in his lies, stated that the whole case is under investigation. In a similar fashion, and just as in unpersuasive manner, the spokespersons of Pentagon and NATO tried to minimize this slaughter. But when it was very clear that the facts are incontrovertible and that the world public cannot be deceived by lies and tricks, they admitted the crime. Some NATO officials are accusing Italian pilots who have been flying for the first time over Yugoslavia, and they finally this afternoon admitted that the refugee column was bombed by their planes. On the paper that they gave to the journalists, they again called this crime in a shameful way just a pure mistake. For them, the murder of more than 70 civilians and wounding of more than 100 people simply a mistake. The same thing was claimed when they killed dozens of civilians in Aleksinac, Ćuprija, Pristina, and in the train in Grdelica. For these criminals who are killing people by pressing computer buttons and record this on video, people are simple figures. They're simple statistical data. This kind of monstrous behavior has not been noted even in the worst time of of Nazism. We wonder whether finally the Hague Tribunal, authorized to investigate crimes committed on the territory of former Yugoslavia, pressed charges against this undeniable genocide and crime against humanity, against murderers such as Clinton, Blair, Chirac, Schröder, Solana, Clark, and others who commit daily extremely vicious acts against civilians and a whole nation, especially since now the Hague investigators do not need to struggle in obtaining the evidence. All evidence is at the table. Evidence about this genocide, and that's being committed every day, and the whole world has seen this evidence. The exact number of all of the people dead from yesterday's bombardment of the column of refugees is not possible to determine yet. The investigative judge from Đakovica, Milenko Momčilović, stated that so far they have found, located 69 corpses, primarily women, children and old people. These bodies can be identified. Comprehensive search and investigation is underway. In the Đakovica hospital yesterday were brought 43 wounded people from this attack, stated the surgeon Ali Toljaj. Đakovica hospital is continuing to receive all these wounded people from yesterday's attack. The world is shocked by the bombardment of this colony of refugees when the planes of the criminal NATO alliance attacked 4 times a column of Albanian refugees returning to their homes, killing more than 70 innocent people. So far, the war against Yugoslavia was a real catastrophe. After yesterday's unprecedented evil, this aggression has become a crusade of NATO against all Yugoslav peoples. Devious criminal act is how the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Russia termed the attack on the column of refugees. The announcement stresses that this is a grave violation of the norms of international law, a revolting act that necessitates further investigation. NATO bombardment is more and more often targeting civilians, innocent people. That confirms once again that one should stop these military actions of NATO and go back to political negotiations. This is what stated in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. In the same statement, they omit that this was a column of Albanian refugees that were returning home. The lower house of the Russian parliament, Duma, will initiate procedures for bringing charges in front of the International Military Tribunal. The murder of innocent civilians, attacks on civilian facilities, the danger of environmental catastrophe caused by NATO are reasons enough for the International Military Tribunal, was stated in Duma by the President Gennady Seleznyov, who stressed that the justice must reach those who began military actions against Yugoslavia. The bombardment of the civilian train and the refugees yesterday is a mindless crime, mockery of the entire international community, said the President of the Federal Council, Yegor Strojev, adding that NATO actions have no justification. This mass murder, said Strojev, cannot be forgotten. Kina is showing a strong concern and sorrow for the victims of this NATO aggression, appealing for a stopping of the attacks of the NATO alliance. The representative of the Foreign Affairs Ministry, Sun Yat-sen, on the occasion of this evil bombardment of NATO of the civilians, expressed China's concern regarding the humanitarian catastrophe caused by the NATO bombardment. He stressed the consistent position of China that the bombing should be stopped so as to return the Kosovo problem to a political resolution. Official Beijing demands a respect for the territorial integrity and sovereignty of Yugoslavia and a guarantee for the legitimate rights of all ethnic communities. NATO has been smeared with civilian blood, states today's Independent, talking again about this tragic and, as NATO would say, collateral damage. Since it was shown so many times so far that NATO and the British Defence Minister operate with unchecked data, believing their main source, which is KLA, Guardian asked several British citizens, official publics, how much can you believe? Member of the Parliament, Tom Delisle, said that in wars the first casualty is always the truth, recalling the transparent propaganda of the West during the Gulf War. The journalist Philip Knightley, a veteran of foreign affairs reporting, stated that NATO and British Defence Ministry, as parties to a war, are very difficult to trust at this stage. In other words, everything they say is propaganda calculated to secure public approval for military actions, said Knightley. Stirred by this unprecedented crime against civilians, Yugoslavia presented a request for an immediate call for a session of the UN Security Council. So far there has been no answer, and we do not know whether the Security Council will respond to this appeal and its responsibility to consider this tragic situation created by NATO aggression. In the letter that was presented last night to the presiding member of the UN Security Council by the head of the Yugoslav mission to UN, Ambassador Vladislav Jovanovic, this letter details the facts of the horrible massacre of the innocent civilians. Yugoslavia demands that the UN Security Council condemn the latest crime of the NATO aggressors against civilians who were returning to their homes. The State Duma, at a plenary session scheduled for tomorrow, will consider the draft document on the accession of Federal Republic of Yugoslavia to the Union of Russia and Belarus. The decision to consider this document, prepared by 3 committees, was adopted by the Council of Duma at today's session. At the same session, it was decided that the Russian parliament appeals to the parliaments of the European countries with a warning about the danger of the environmental catastrophe that can be caused by the NATO bombing of Yugoslavia. Kremlin gives positive marks to the discussion of the President of Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko, and President of Yugoslavia, Milosevic. President Lukashenko phoned today President Yeltsin, telling him of the results from the meeting with Mr. Milosevic. During that discussion, Moscow and Minsk made an agreement on the mechanisms of further political approach to the Kosovo crisis. Alexander Lukashenko announced that Yugoslavia is ready to find a political solution for the crisis, but it will never agree to a presence of foreign military troops on its territory. Russia considers this aggression of NATO a totally unacceptable form of action towards sovereign states, and therefore resists and believes that only political solution can be sought, not by threats and ultimatums of the North Atlantic Alliance. This was stated by the Prime Minister of Russia, Evgeny Primakov. As Boris Yeltsin announced today, Russia considers new peace initiatives in which participates the Special Envoy of Russia, Viktor Chernomyrdin, who is expected to do quite a bit. Viktor Chernomyrdin, the Special Envoy of the President of Russia, will say that he will undertake everything in his power to find peaceful solution, including a trip to Yugoslavia and perhaps to other countries to find solution for the crisis. Chernomyrdin said that in his work he will cooperate very closely with the government and the Ministry of Defense and Foreign Affairs, as well as with the representatives of both houses of the parliament. In any case, one has to find a peaceful solution. We cannot have negotiations while there is bombardment. Chernomyrdin demanded that NATO stops the bombardment. The Federal Minister of Foreign Affairs, Gvozdenovic, in a meeting with the delegation of the Progressive Workers' Party of Cyprus, AKEL, the largest party in Cyprus, spoke about the consequences of the evil attacks of NATO and stressed the determination of our country to defend and win its freedom and independence. In the meeting with the representatives of AKEL from the Cypriot parliament, Nikos Katsouridis and Doros Christodoulidis, who is also vice president of the party in the European Parliament, Minister Jovanovic stressed that NATO aggression is a precedent that endangers the security and freedom of the world because it eliminates law and imposes might as the only criterion of international relations. Given the link between NATO and the Albanian terrorists and separatists, this precedent is especially dangerous for multi-religious and multi-ethnic countries, those faced with terrorism and separatism. The guests noted the unyielding support of Cyprus to the just struggle of the Yugoslav people, who are determined and have courage and give shining example to the freedom-loving world on how to defend one's law, freedom and dignity. Yugoslavia in this way defends the highest goals of the European and world civilization against the brutal force of the so-called agents of the New World Order. The representatives of this largest Cypriot party especially condemned the killing of civilians and the destruction of houses, hospitals and factories. The criminal Air Force last night, for a 23rd night of aggression against Yugoslavia, bombed many civilian facilities in Serbia, causing a lot of material damage. Target were Belgrade, Pristina, Kuršumlija, Kragujevac, Čačak, Valjevo, Niš, Kruševac and Kraljevo. They destroyed TV Serbia relay tower at Ovčar, relay stations at Zlatibor and Loznica. The criminal aggressors destroyed bridge on the railroad, Belgrade Bar. This is the image that we recorded.
Danas smo svi jedna partija.
Today we are all one party.
Njeno ime je sloboda.
Its name is freedom. This morning around 3:30, a combat plane of the aggressor crashed on the mountain Bjelašnica, very close to Sarajevo. According to eyewitness accounts, the plane was damaged and the pilot probably tried to land on Sarajevo airport. It is supposed that the aggressor plane was hit by the anti-aircraft units of the Yugoslav army. Immediately afterwards, there was a stronger presence of S-4 units, as well as several helicopters that were probably looking for the pilot. The NATO criminals for days are conducting not only aggression against our country, but also conducting a media war against the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia. To the daily destruction of antennas and relay stations of radio television Serbia, these criminals are conducting a warmongering propaganda from many countries, especially from Croatia, where they try from airplanes to show some kind of TV program for our citizens. For days, with their murderous attacks from the planes, they're also throwing these leaflets that are addressed to the people of our country. This is what these leaflets look like. This is what they throw at you, and this is what is written. We will not be dealing now with the illiteracy and the stupidity of the author of this text, but we will merely comment a little bit on their contents. Blinded by their evil actions, these illiterate authors of NATO flyers went so far as to think that they can deceive our people, the citizens of Yugoslavia and Serbia, who know everything about their country, with these flyers, just as they deceive successfully their public that knows nothing about Kosovo, and which is not very difficult to deceive precisely because of that, and which they do, preparing their public for media justification of this criminal aggression against the sovereign country. In their blindness and so-called concern, these flyers that you see in front of your eyes appeal to our citizens, saying, in the past few weeks, Serbian army and police, under direct command of Slobodan Milosevic, emptied towns and villages of Kosovo, torching or destroying thousands of houses. Who destroyed and who emptied the villages? This is what our people, just as any other well-intentioned person, can see every day from the beginning of this aggression of the evil enemy. From the 24th of March, NATO aggressors have destroyed with their bombs houses. From their bombs, people run away and become refugees. Today in this flyer they say, there is fear that there are thousands of innocent civilians that have been killed. Hundreds of thousands have fled in order not to become victims of the Milosevic pogrom. Please do not allow yourselves to be manipulated by misdirected patriotism. Let's leave it to the side that the aggressor aspires to tell us what is good and what is a misdirected patriotism. Let's just say that the entire world could see yesterday by looking at the recording of the massacre of the Albanian refugees from Đakovica, see who kills civilians and innocent people and who are they fleeing. The entire world could see that these innocent civilians are killed by NATO. and the officials of NATO today finally admit it. This side of the NATO flyer says the North Atlantic Alliance defends the defenseless. Yesterday we saw how NATO criminals defend the defenseless, killing over 70 innocent and unarmed civilians. We also saw it in Aleksinac, Čuprija, Priština, Kuršumlija, Čačak, how NATO kills the defenseless. On the other side of the flyer it says NATO will intensify its attacks until the forces that participate in the fight against civilians from Kosovo withdraw, until the refugees are allowed to return home safely, and until your leaders begin fruitful negotiations. NATO remains determined to defend the defenseless in Kosovo. How NATO secures the return of the refugees could unfortunately be seen yesterday again when the Albanians coming to their homes were hit by bombs, and when their secure return was being secured by members of our government. And who doesn't want negotiations? We can also see for months, every day, before Rambouillet, after Rambouillet, and even today, when instead of discussion, NATO offers only threats, ultimatums, and blackmail. No sight of negotiations as far as the representatives of the international community gathered in NATO, but there are negotiations among our state and Albanians that are represented by Mr. Rugova, and these negotiations have been going on for days, but NATO criminals do not want to see these negotiations because they're not in their interest, because throughout this time President Milosevic has been trying to call for negotiations, claiming that without discussion there is no solution for the Kosovo crisis. Only discussions can go towards a fruitful decision that would be acceptable for everyone and that can be implemented. Attempting to reach any citizen of our country in any possible way. The NATO propagandists even gave out flyers with frequencies of our well-known radio stations, so that even for a moment our citizens would believe that these stupidities of NATO are our news, that is to say, news reports of our radio stations. However, it's in vain that they throw these flyers. They're just wasting paper. It's in vain that they show that deceptive TV program, because nobody watches such a program, and if somebody runs into a program like that, they can only laugh at it. The Vice President of the Government of Serbia, Miloran Bojic, and Minister of Industry Života Ćosić visited sites near Kruševac, a town that was attacked again last night by NATO. The material damage is huge. There is no production in the factory 14th of October, and part of the county of Kruševac, because of the destroyed bridge, is cut from Kruševac. More than 10 missiles hit civilian objects as well as the industrial zone of Kruševac. The target was the machine factory 14th of October, as well as the heating plant, the sports center, and part of the medical center. This site was visited today by the Vice President Milovan Bojic and Minister of Industry Života Ćosić. 6,500 workers from this factory are jobless because the factory is destroyed. The material damage is huge, but the workers are already trying to repair the factory. We will see what we shall do. We will be looking for alternative programs in the facilities that we hope will not be attacked anymore, or that will be at least partially preserved by the action of all of the employees who are trying to rescue whatever can be rescued, who are trying to get away from this damage. We'll try to organize a production of spare parts and at least provide existence for some of the workers. I'm convinced in our victory because I believe in our people, in our labor. The victory will be ours. We shall maintain, persevere. There is no dilemma. The government of the Republic of Serbia has undertaken comprehensive measures for an economic and social program to take care of all of the workers who have been temporarily left jobless, and to allow for those that can continue working, start working again. The target was also the bridge on Western Morava River that was destroyed by 2 missiles, so more than 10 villages have been cut from Kruševac and their livelihood. This is more of the criminal deeds of the fascist aggressors who thought that by destroying this bridge they could split the county of Kruševac. They're deceiving themselves because they have not split us, nor will they manage to divide the spirit of the citizens of our republic in their attempts to defend the country. They can destroy our bridges. They can inflict even more casualties, but they cannot conquer Serbia. Finally, the visitor stressed that the country has to be defended, that we shall persevere, and then with alternative programs we shall make up for everything that was destroyed by NATO. The NATO aggression against Yugoslavia is an evil act against peace, stability and humanity, stated the spokesperson of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the assistant to the minister Nebojša Vujović in Belgrade. Yugoslavia is not the only casualty of NATO. The casualties are also the charters of UN and the organizations for European cooperation, whose members by this aggression violate the directive on their defensive character, stressed Vujović at the exceptionally well-attended press conference attended by 64 foreign journalists, including representatives of leading world media. Vujović stressed that any discussions on a political resolution of the problem in Kosovo necessitates an immediate stopping of the aggression. The spokesperson of the Foreign Affairs Ministry also said that Yugoslavia can accept only a discussion about civilian presence in Kosovo, only from countries that did not take part in the aggression. We do not want any missions such as the verifier mission of OSCE that fled Kosovo in order to open way for aggression, nor missions such as NATO has been trying to impose. There is no agreement that can carve the borders of our brave country, stated Vujović, adding that we shall use all our powers to defend ourselves from the aggressor while working at the same time on the political process for Kosovo. Vujović also stated that the Rambouillet agreement was simply a pretext for the military aggression, confirming that the Yugoslav government is ready for political negotiations with all parties that want to stop the bombing and find peaceful solution for Kosovo. The president of the Interim Council of Kosovo, Zoran Anđelković, met today in Pristina representatives of the International Federation and the International Committee of Red Cross, as well as the representatives of the Yugoslav Red Cross organization. In this discussion, they said that despite the daily bombardment of the evil alliance, life in Kosovo is becoming more and more normal. The president of the Interim Council expressed his hope that the international humanitarian organizations will help the endangered population and the civilians that suffer by the NATO aggressor. The president of the party of the Yugoslav left, Professor Mira Marković, visited today the orphanage in Zvečanska Street. The orphanage in Zvečanska, that's currently housing 304 children up to 3 years of age, was founded in 1879 for orphan children from the war between Serbia and Turkey. In April of 1944, those who are bombarding us today also hit this institution. Professor Mira Marković visited all of the children and gave them presents. She also agreed to be the sponsor of the 120 years anniversary of this orphanage that's again receiving children that are casualties. According to the statements of Serbian minority from Albania, under threats and pressure of the Albanian government, they're leaving their homes from Omara Vrake Grill, going to Serbia and Montenegro. This was reported by the Ministry for the Diaspora. The few males that have been left to protect their homes are continually attacked and abused by Albanian terrorists who are training themselves in many military camps in northern Albania. In the world, there is more and more condemnation of the NATO aggression against Yugoslavia and more appeals for a peaceful solution of this crisis. The aggressor countries, however, continue to justify their evils. The Greek Prime Minister Kostas Simitis and President of Bulgaria Ivan Kostov announced after a meeting in Sofia that Bulgaria and Greece are appealing for a peaceful and quick solution of the Kosovo crisis. Kostov says that this aggression destabilizes all of the Balkans, and Simitis said that there is necessity for immediate initiatives. German Bundestag, the lower house of the parliament, supported the position of the Chancellor Schröder for the aggression of NATO, warning, however, some ministers against their warmongering rhetoric, and also demanding to review the participation of the German army in this aggression. There was decisive support of the aggression from Chancellor Schröder and Martin Fischer. However, Gregor Gysi, on behalf of the Democratic Socialist Party, appealed for an immediate stopping, stressing that it constitutes a grave violation of international law. Gregor Gysi also stated upon returning from Belgrade that the goal of his trip was to contribute to the peaceful resolution of the crisis and stop this mindless aggression. Gysi also said that the Serbs are so bitter against Germany and West as a whole that for generations this is not going to be overcome. He also excluded all of the peaceful proposals that are based on stationing foreign troops in Kosovo. Gysi said that Serbia will never voluntarily allow for a single foreign soldier to cross on their territory. At the same time, the German government that's apparently appealing for a peaceful solution, they accused Gysi for his visit to Belgrade. The German writer Martin Walzer also condemned the NATO aggression of NATO against Yugoslavia and the campaign of lies. All of the information about NATO immediately forces the viewers to basically believe that this is the right approach. The German writer was especially talking about the warmongering campaign in the German television that constantly shows the suffering of the Albanian refugees from Kosovo. But those are fleeing essentially the NATO terrorism, the NATO bombs. It is cynical that they're saying that they're bombing the civilian targets in order to save lives, but yesterday with their own bombs they killed 70 civilians, said Valdes. The special envoy in United Nations for Human Rights, Jiří Dinspir, appealed today to the international community to stop the unfair and mindless aggression and called for stopping of the economic sanctions against Yugoslavia. Dinspir stressed that it is the responsibility of the international community to repair everything that has been destroyed in this NATO aggression. For 10 years, the international community is making one mistake after the other. He stressed that from the beginning, this was a Balkan problem as a whole. He also reminded that in Serbia there are 500,000 Serb refugees from Croatia and Bosnia, and unless there is a fast resolution and stopping of this bombing, there will be further conflict that can encompass all of the Balkans, including Greece and Bulgaria, warned Jiří Dinspir. Secretary General of the United Spanish Left, Julio Agnita, called NATO international terrorists. They accused the Madrid government of an evil pro-American policy towards Yugoslavia. The respected Spanish daily El Mundo stated that NATO is completely confused and disorganized. The political goals of this military action against Yugoslavia are completely unclear. The paper says that not even the generals can hit their targets in Yugoslavia. It's primarily civilians and civilian facilities that become the casualties. They're also pointing to the American hypocrisy that continue with their threats while talking about political solution. The members of the Revolutionary League of Austria presented in video, photo and video material about the destruction of civilian facilities in Yugoslavia. These left organizations visited between the 7th and the 9th of April Yugoslavia, and they were convinced in many cities what is the brutality of the NATO aggression against Yugoslavia. The members of this delegation condemned the aggression, comparing it to the Third Reich. Federal Republic of Yugoslavia was the only obstacle against the imperialist goals of NATO, and that's why it was attacked. But the people of Yugoslavia are united and ready to fight the aggressor. This was said by the Communist League of Austria. Describing the aggression against Yugoslavia today, the French paper Monde Diplomatique talks that this is a US war for a new world order that has been Washington's dream since the end of the Cold War. On the one hand, they're trying to impose their economic hegemony through this globalization and an ideological war through cultural institution, but now they're looking for political and strategic alternative. This new direction of the American president can cause permanent chaos in the Balkans and suffering of all of the people, and Europe will be left alone to resolve this chaos in the end. The new Communist Party of Macedonia sent an open letter to President Gligorov and the Prime Minister Georgievski, warning them not to dismiss the struggle of Yugoslavia against NATO. The entire normal world has grasped NATO's unprecedented crime, while Gligorov and Georgievski continue to support the mad murderers Clinton, Schroeder, Blair, Solana, Albright, and all of those that they represent. The Macedonian communists stress that the leadership of Macedonia has to finally understand that the Serbian struggle in Kosovo is a defense of Macedonian sovereignty. Macedonians living in the western part of the country announced that under Albanian pressure they will leave their homes. This happened after a whole new series of incidents between the ethnic groups. One of the biggest fights occurred after the soccer game Tetek Skendia, when a large group of Albanians occupied the downtown area of Tetovo and then attacked many Macedonian passers-by, inflicting some serious bodily injuries. The Albanians banged on Macedonian houses, calling out slogans in support of the terrorist Albanian gangs in Kosovo. Tetovo has recently received several thousand Albanians from Kosovo, distressing the local Macedonians further, who claim that all of this is according to a scenario from Albania aiming at an opportune moment for a secession of Western Macedonia towards Albania. The government, for the sake of peace in the coalition, is silent on these facts. There are protests around the world against the NATO alliance. The demonstrators are demanding an immediate stopping of this bombing against Yugoslavia and the killing of civilians. The Italian union, Cobas, began an initiative to stop the bombing. The members of this organization are trying to express the solidarity with the workers of the Zastava factory in Kragujevac, as well as with all of the employees in the factories of Yugoslavia that have been destroyed by the NATO planes. From the Portuguese TV, we got this report about the anti-NATO demonstration. Around 1,000 demonstrators in Portugal's capital, Lisbon, expressed their bitterness about the NATO aggression. Carrying American flags with swastika, they were calling, "NATO fascists, get out of the Balkans, NATO no, peace yes." They demanded immediate stopping to the bombardment of this European state and withdrawal of Portuguese forces from NATO. The sirens for air raids appeared among the people. This was a symbolic sign what kind of horror caused by the NATO bombardment is being faced by the Yugoslav citizens at the threshold of the 21st century. In Nicosia on Cyprus, there was a humanitarian concert called Stop to the Bombs. The citizens expressed their revolt against the evil aggression against Yugoslavia by the NATO gangs. At the concert, they also demanded an immediate cessation of this bombardment of a sovereign country and stopping of the murder of the innocent civilians. All present supported the Serbian people in their defense of their country. There were representatives from public and cultural life of Cyprus. Daily, there are many protests in Cyprus and gathering of humanitarian assistance for Yugoslavia. With slogans, NATO out, Kosovo is Serbia. In Vienna, once again, for 21st time, there were demonstrations of Serbs living in Austria and their Austrian friends against the brutal aggression of NATO. At the meeting, they showed the freedom of the Yugoslav people and their perseverance against the NATO aggression led by USA. Representatives of Austrian non-governmental organization condemned the media campaign of the Austrian media that sides with the aggressor. In Warsaw, at the appeal of the Polish Committee for Support of Yugoslavia, there were demonstrations against the evil bombing of Yugoslavia by NATO alliance. The participants supported the courageous and brotherly nation in their defense against this fascist aggression, appealing to all international organizations to condemn this aggression and stop it immediately. At the same time, there were many speeches in front of the Yugoslav and the American embassies, calling Polish people to express their solidarity in a more determined way with the Serbian people and distance themselves from the Polish government that has supported the aggression.
C-SPAN. Created in 1979 by America's cable television companies.